Okay, my name is Adam Doyle. I am a multimedia journalist in broadcast services for Texas Tech Athletics. A lot of it is basically seeking out stories within the athletic department from all sports, finding different stories that we can tell about athletes from a number of different sports, shooting those, editing those, kind of telling stories and providing content for the website, for social media, for YouTube. A lot of the platforms that people are finding things on nowadays. And some of it is as simple as doing what the media would do, shooting media availabilities, highlights of games, things of that nature. In a lot of aspects, I'm just kind of, depending on what sport it is, I'm just supposed to engulf myself in those athletes and in that sport and give them what they need video-wise. No, I didn't have this position before. I did something pretty similar. I was a sports reporter, a weekend sports anchor and reporter for KCBD News Channel 11 here in Lubbock for 2 years, a little over 2 years before I moved over to Tech. And I'm doing something very similar here than I did there. The only difference, the main difference being that I'm not, doing the 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock news, not doing live shots, things of that nature. Before that, I was an intern at KCBD for a short period of time, and I was an intern for the better part of a year for KFOR, the NBC affiliate in Oklahoma City. So basically a lot of local television at a pretty large market and a medium-sized market before I made my way over to Tech. Multimedia, I mean, multi is clearly in the name, so it's really, it's kind of, the way I would define it is it's a number of different platforms in which your video content, your photos, all of that stuff is all the different platforms that stuff would go on and trying to reach it out to the masses. It's crazy. I mean, and it has to do with more probably with the phone and the little devices that we carry around all the time. That has changed everything. Now, when you went from the flip phones to the smartphones, now content is distributed and received so differently, because even growing up, and the way I talk about it makes me sound like an old soul, like it was 40 years ago. But even 10 to 15 years ago, it felt like getting on television was still a way to kind of make yourself known. Now you don't need that anymore. You have clearly YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you said it, Periscope, Facebook Live, all these different things. You can go live, you can do whatever you want from your phone, and you can make a name for yourself, or you can broadcast something immediately. Today's age is so immediate. It's made our attention span so short as well, because we can get things so quickly. We don't need to wait till 6 or 10 o'clock at night to hear what's going on in the world. So yeah, just in the last 10 years, things have changed drastically. And what we do, especially here, is completely different now too. We have to realize that our audience isn't wanting to wait around and watch 4 to 5 minutes worth of something, or even two people just talking. They don't have as much of an interest in it now. They need it. They need it now. They need the content immediately, directly to the point, and that changes a lot of what we do. So it's just it's the age that we live in. I think a lot of it is our features. Depending on what television outlet you come from, depending on what school you went to, features can range from an entire documentary, which could go up to 30 to an hour, to what we've seen with some of the ESPN documentaries up to 9 to 10 hours worth of content. But now you shrink all of that. I came from television where a 1.5 to 2 minute package was exactly what they were looking for. You would front it for 30 seconds, and then you would have a 1.5 minutes tell that story, and then you kick back to the anchor. We are having to shrink those things even shorter than that, which it becomes very difficult to tell someone's story in a minute. I mean, you have to think about that. Can I tell somebody what this person went through growing up, or what's unique about this person? Can I do it in 1 minute? That's what makes things challenging nowadays. Typically, even in DTI and things of that nature, we get to, you have a 4 minute package. It's like, we've got to make that, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes at the longest, because people just aren't going to follow it for that long. That's the main thing that I see. You're not, highlights, things of that nature, you don't have to shrink those down, because that's a live event, that's a game that people are going to tune in for. They want to know everything that happened in the game, so they're not going to worry about that as much necessarily. But yeah, when telling stories, you got to shrink it down a lot. That's probably been the biggest difference. I wouldn't say one specific instance, but I'd say that over time, when you have meetings with the marketing department, and they, maybe to a fault at sometimes, take some of the analytics that we see on social media maybe too seriously, but you have to pay attention to them. Because when you see how many people have watched the video on Twitter or Facebook, and then you see how many people saw it on their timeline, and you see how many people watched it all the way through. When you see the discrepancy between those three numbers, and you're like, okay, well, 20,000 people saw it on their phone. Okay, but how many people engaged with it? How many people watched the entire thing? That's what gets scary, because when you actually know those things, like in specific numbers, it honestly can make you think a little bit too much about what you're doing, instead of just focusing on the task at hand and telling a story or getting that information out to somebody. But I don't think there was a specific instance in which we realized that. If anybody ever tells you that they have social media figured out, or if they have media itself figured out, you could take a swing at that person, because they clearly don't know what they're talking about. It's going to keep changing, and nobody's going to have a great grasp on it. And we're all just kind of we're not throwing stuff against the wall and hoping it sticks, but it's close to that. Everybody's kind of in a race to figure it out, and nobody quite can. As many people use Facebook, I don't know the exact number. I want to know how many people. It's crazy how many people use Facebook. And Twitter is still an extremely powerful force, and Instagram continues to grow. Snapchat is crazy. It's everything. You have to live on those things in order to get all of your audience, because there are generational and demographic gaps between all of these social media outlets. So Facebook, clearly an older demographic. Twitter is kind of in my wheelhouse. It's informational. It's kind of I feel like it's something very beneficial to me. Instagram seems like the group that's just younger, a few years younger than I am, and then Snapchat is crazy. I mean, that's the one that's kind of tough to grasp and get completely figured out. But there's so many of them, and they'll continue to grow. You have to stay on top of those things, and that's why I think you see that a lot of our department is young, and a lot of athletics communications is young, because the target audience, a lot of this stuff is younger people, and they spread it to the older people. I feel like that Facebook, YouTube, those are kind of the older demographics, and that's how we get those things. And I know that I don't know the specifics on it, but I know that external operations in general now is finding ways to send our content through email and things of that nature to the older demographic, to a lot of our donors as well, to get them that material, because it's more difficult to get to them, because there's a couple steps in there that seem simple to younger people that are technologically savvy. Some of the older people that weren't raised on all the technology, they become kind of the harder group to reach. Still a very important group that we have to reach, though, because they bring a lot of finances to the university.